Yo, what's up, guys? This Topic's here, and wanted to film a video on whose fault the Mythic Plus meta is. And if you guys follow me on X or subscribe on YouTube, you'll know that I posted a poll on this. So I want to show that right now. We'll take a look at X first. Move this over. So I asked this question: who is to blame for the extreme meta-driven nature of high M plus keys? This one only had 4 votes. Not a lot of followers on X right now, so if you want more Warrior or WoW content in general, just throw me a follow there. But 75% of you said the players, and 1 said Blizzard, so this is basically just 3 votes for players, 1 for Blizzard. But I got even more engagement on YouTube, where I asked who is to blame for the extreme meta-driven nature of high M plus keys. And 74 votes, so a lot of engagement here. Thank you guys for that. 65% of you said the players, and 35% said Blizzard. So if I combine this with the other votes, it's basically like 1/3 Blizzard and 2/3 the players. So a good chunk of you definitely think it's Blizzard's fault, but the majority of you think it's the players' fault. So I wanted to talk about what I think in this video and why I think that. So I made some points in a Word document, and that I'm going to go over in a second, but I got to preface this conversation with 2 things. Number 1, before we answer this question, we have to ask ourselves, will there always be a meta, yes or no? And then why or why not is the second part. So I think it's pretty obvious in 2025, in any competitive game, whether it's an MMO, whether it's an RPG, FPS, or an RTS, whatever the case may be, I think it's very obvious the answer is yes. No matter what game it is, there will always be something that's the best. In WoW, that might be a class, that might be a spec, or a combination of. In other games, maybe like an RTS, there's always going to be a best way to start things, a number of steps that you need to take. In an FPS, there might be a specific way to hold your reticle. There might be a specific strat that you want to take on a certain map. There's always going to be a meta no matter what in today's gaming in the competitive scene. I think that's obvious. So the answer is yes, there will always be a meta. And I think regardless of what camp you're in, the players being responsible for this or Blizzard, I think everyone can agree that there will always be a meta. The question is, how strong is that meta? How required is it? Is another story. But then the second part I wanted to ask before I get into what my opinion is why is that the case? Why is there going to be a meta? Well, there's going to be a meta because players are sweaty. And, some people play games for strictly fun. Some people play them to push themselves to the limit, to see how much they can min-max. They want to get the highest score, be the best they possibly can be. Some people plays for a living, right? They're a full-time streamer, full-time gamer. Maybe they're on a team where they're getting paid. They're doing Race to World First. They're doing TGP MDI. In other games, there'll be other tournaments that you can do for probably a lot more money than what WoW pays. So, yes, there will always be a meta. And why is there going to be meta? Mainly, it's because people are competitive, and some people actually do this for a living. And when you have people watching streams and content and tournaments, and they see what the meta is, they simply say to themselves, well, I want the game to come that easy to me. I want to be that powerful. I want to be that good. So definitely the culture is shifting away from the fantasy of the game and the actual role-playing aspect of the game, more towards being competitive and being good and what's powerful and strong. So I think that's why there will always be a meta, and why there will be a meta, and why that's the case. So now that we've solidified that, I want to move into the first question here, or basically my first point. And before I get into this, my answer is I actually believe it's majority Blizzard's fault. And the reason I prefaced it with there will always be a meta, and that's why there will be a meta, is because it kind of plays into the points I'm going to go over here. So I'm in the camp of the 1/3 of you guys that actually think it's Blizzard's fault. And I actually disagree that it's majority of the players' fault, and here's why. this is the number one thing that affects the meta, okay? It's class balance, numbers, and abilities. So when we look at the worst seasons in terms of like an Exodia comp, it largely has to do with class balance, numbers, and abilities. I mean, if we look at Shadow Priest and Dragonflight, like season 3 and 4, and part of season 2 after Og came in, I mean, that class was doing absolutely broken numbers. I mean, we're talking 20 mil overall on some pulls back then, before numbers were even as high as they are now. If we look at like Locke at the end of Dragonflight, or at the end of Shadowlands, and some of the AoE damage it was able to do, just melting mobs down. If we look at some of the classes right now, like DK at the beginning was so meta because it just wouldn't die. I mean, there was literally people saying that it was tankier than some tank specs. I mean, it literally was just a live lord. And you look at enhancement, the numbers that that's pulling in some pulls right now. I mean, it's undeniable that numbers have a huge impact on class balance. The second thing is abilities, right? How many defensives does your class have? What's the utility kit look like? There are classes right now like Warrior, which is the class that I main, that bring almost nothing. What do we bring to a group? We bring Rallying Cry for all specs. If you're protection, you can intervene somebody, but that's an extremely niche ability. It's only useful in like a couple scenarios in the whole dungeon pool. And then you bring your party buff, Battle Shout, which only impacts physical damage dealing classes. So your party buff is only affecting a few classes. Intervene can only be used in very niche scenarios, and it's not that strong. And then your party defensive Rallying Cry is only 10% HP. So not only do we only bring like 3 things, but they're weak, all 3 of them. And then you have classes like Enhancement this season, or maybe like Druid or something, where they're just loaded, right? Like they have AoE stops, they have knockbacks or knockups, they have a CC like Roots or Hex. Their party buff is super good. You get versatility, maybe you get the Sky Fury, you bring Bloodlust, you bring Battle Res, you have Dispels, you can talent into all these other things, like, you know, you can have a slow, you can have a poison cleansing totem. It's just ridiculous the amount of thing. And like, you know, obviously if you're Druid, you can shapeshift and do a bunch of other stuff there, but like it's ridiculous the utility kits that some of these classes have that others don't. You know, DK doesn't actually have that good of a kit, so the reason it was strong early in the season is because of numbers. But now that there's been some tuning, you can see that it's actually fallen out of the meta because it doesn't actually bring a lot. So class balance, 100% the number one reason, the number one thing that dictates the meta. You know, numbers, how strong is your class, tanky, how much healing it can do, and then abilities, what's your kit look like. And who controls this? This is Blizzard. So I'm going to go into the second thing that I believe, and I hit it here, so it's a little bit of a surprise. But, oops, that's the wrong thing. I'm going to do this. This is the number 2 thing that dictates the meta. Dungeon design, including mechanics and requirements, okay? The way that Blizzard is designing these dungeons, it makes your life a lot easier if you have certain things, right? We have curse dispel requirements. We have poison disease dispel requirements. Maybe you need something CC'd. Maybe you have to skip something, like in Mists of Tierna Sight. Nobody's doing the second pull. Everybody's skipping. You need a class that can wall pull, okay? Necrotic Wake. You don't have MC Cleaver Tech and High Keys. It's just done. You might be able to pull it off after 100 tries and a perfect run, but if you have MC Cleaver Tech, it makes your life a lot easier. You can literally add 2 to 3 key levels to that dungeon. So these are just a few things out of many that also dictates the meta. You know, the amount of kicks and casts that are going off in mobs right now, Prop Paladin having an offensive ability on a short cooldown that also kicks the mobs is broken. They also had another ability, Divine Toll, that also kicks the mobs. So not only do they have a kick, but they have 2 offensive rotational abilities that also kick the mobs. Like, they were able to solo kick a lot of stuff. You know, it reminds me of VDH, the end of Shadowlands, when they were just CCing everything and they could just solo CC and control entire mobs. And who controls this? Blizzard controls this. They're the ones that are designing the dungeons. They're the ones that they're figuring out what we want to be required in these dungeons, right? Do we want skips? Do we want dispels? Do we need certain things to be CC'd? So this is another reason why I believe Blizzard is to fault here. Now, let's look at the third one. Keystone system and failure punishment, okay? Again, this is Blizzard. They're designing these things. So, yes, we have strong classes that are not balanced, that have a bigger utility kit. Yes, Blizzard designs dungeons with certain mechanics and requirements. But guess what they also do? They've also been severely punishing you for failing keys recently, right? Up until now, it was horrible if you're pugging and you didn't have a team to deplete your key. Because then if you deplete again, a lot of people sent their keys into the abyss, right? You'd have like a 15, you're all excited, maybe a 16. You're like, oh, I'm excited, I'm getting to these title keys, but you don't have a team. You deplete your key, goes to a 14. You're like, okay, that's not bad. I just have a little bit of homework here. You deplete again, it goes to a 13. You're like, okay, now I'm worried that the players I'm going to get, applying to this, maybe it's their first time doing a 13, right? Not a lot of people are doing homework on 13s. It depletes again. Now you're in 12s. Now you're like, okay, the 12 was the entry point, right? There's the big gap between 11 and 12. A lot of people are stuck in 11s. They're grinding 12s forever and ever to try and get them. So you can see how punishing it was. Not only that, but you barely got any crests. Up until they made the recent change a couple months ago, you barely got any crests if you depleted a key. So it was even more punishing, right? So that's another thing players are thinking about. They're like, I want to set myself up for success by bringing the extremely strong classes with big utility kits that can handle the dungeon mechanics and requirements, because if I fail, it's very punishing. I don't want to deplete my key. I want to get crests. I don't want to spend all this time pushing it back up. Who has the power to change all these things? Not the players. Blizzard does. Now, those of you that said that it's the players' fault, I see where you're coming from, because the players are the ones that are actually making the decisions on who to take to keys. They're the ones enforcing the decisions that Blizzard's making. But I think you guys are just forward facing, and that's your initial contact point of what you see is this guy's, accepting or denying me from a key. Why does he have to be so meta driven? Well, the answer why is there will always be a meta. Players are competitive. They want to get their time's worth out of this game. They don't want to waste 45 minutes failing a key. And if you look at those 3 points I made, Blizzard is not making it very easy for people to choose other classes, right? Like, there are actual certain comps this season that you can literally just not time a certain key on. Like, you're not timing a Grimbatal or Stonevault without a D-Curse. It's like, there's a requirement there. You're not timing Mists on a high key without a skip class and without a Walpole class, because you just need that time save. And Necrotic Wake is another story, but like, Blizzard is the one that has the power to control this stuff. If they stopped making, if they worked on class balance where the numbers were tuned better, and every class brought a number of extremely valuable things, like Warrior, we need a lot of stuff. Like, we need our party defensive buffed, we need our raid buff made better. We need maybe Intervene to turn into an external. We need some stuff, right? If Blizzard made classes more balanced and made everyone have a great utility kit, doesn't have to be the same utility kit, we don't want it homogenized, but everyone needs to at least be comparable to what other classes are bringing. They need to scale back on the amount of kicks and stops required on mobs so that it doesn't favor certain classes, and they need to scale back on like the dispel requirements, and they need to stop putting terrible mobs in that you just have to skip, otherwise it just feels terrible. They need to scale back on all this stuff. I am hopeful that with the recent M+ changes that, keys don't deplete once you have everything out of 12 or everything out of 13. I'm hopeful that with that in place, people will be more likely to bring non-meta classes. But Blizzard definitely has the power to control all three of those points I talked about today, which is why the conclusion is I think that they are mainly responsible. So that's it for this video. It's almost 15 minutes long. I've rambled on, but I promised you guys I'd make a video on this, giving my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments below. What do you think about my take? Am I wrong? Am I right? Why or why not? I'm interested to see. It's a polarizing discussion, but hopefully Blizzard listens to us, and they've addressed the key depleting being so punishing. You know, there's still depletes, but they don't deplete as low depending on what keys you have timed. Hopefully they get class balance and some of these dungeon designs a little bit more in check for Season 3. I'm not sure if we'll see much of this happen in Season 2, but hopefully Season 3 they can make some of these changes that will help the meta not be so mandatory. Anyways, thanks guys for watching. Thanks for the support, and we'll see you in the next one.